Hello and welcome to Science and Sorcery's Moment of Awesome. My name's Sam and I am delighted to be back to talk to members of the TTRPG community about who they are, what they do, and why what they do is awesome. And I'm joined by another wonderful guest, RahRah. Who are you and what do you do?
Hey, I'm RahRah, he, they. I'm a Latin podcast runner from the States, and I run the Heart is the Dungeon podcast, which is a sad sack TTRPG adventure for heroes and poets.
Tell us a little bit more about what that means. Like, what is this sad sack podcast all about?
To be honest, our fairy season is not as sad as it was planned to be. I had a whole bunch of trauma lined up for them. And then once they started interacting, I was like, no, the real story here is the relationships. Like, that is the most shiny part of this magical world. So that is our slogan. But I would say there are sadder shows right now. We just are aiming for sentimental, heart-wrenching moments, not letting them kind of happen on the wayside of a larger epic. Like, they are the goal and the intent of the storytelling we do.
And you mentioned that this is your fairy story, which is the season 2. What was season 1 all about? Can you tell a little about that?
Season 1 was a weekend project that has become more. I had talked to Farrell, my spouse creature, quite a bit about these types of projects. I tried to start an audio drama years ago that was people on stage making sounds and doing the old-fashioned radio drama. I have some friends that do some work in that field with weird puppet shows and people behind curtains making all the sound effects and music. And I've always been very moved by that type of storytelling. When I used to be in like acid folk bands, I tried to convince my bandmates to do some weird drama stuff in our weird ass music, and none of them ever took to it. So I'd been talking to Farrell for a while, and then I heard the first episode when it came out of Worlds Beyond Number, and I was like, Farrell, there's people doing it. Like, there's people who are actually going to do this thing I've been talking about for a while, and they're going to do it maybe better than me since I don't know anything about anything. Do you want to record something in like 2 days? And that ended up being the prologue in our first season.
And yeah, Worlds Beyond Number, I think, is like a really good, because I know that other people have said it online, a good analogous descriptor of what the Heart is a Dungeon is like, in terms of like very intricately edited, quite tightly edited as well, like not like long episodes. So I can definitely see the parallels and the inspiration there.
And when I first heard it, it struck me in the heart. It's like this thing I've wanted to do for 15 years. I maybe finally have the space to do it, and people who would be interested in that sort of thing. Because when we started the show, I had only been in the streaming space for 2 months or so. Nothing but funny one-shots under my belt. And I was like, maybe if people aren't running sad games, maybe I should run some sad games. And that was sort of what happened.
And I think it's definitely something that the sphere was crying out for, because there's a lot of serious, there's a lot of drama, but like in terms of a lot of kind of sentimental or sad and quite emotional games, like there hasn't been enough of that in my opinion. So it's like really great to see that that's something that you guys are focusing on. But you started end of 2023, so like really not that long ago. And it seems to have really rapidly risen, at least in terms of what you're putting out and how often you're like creating, or but also like awards or webfest entries and things like that, right?
Yeah, everything we've entered, we've placed in so far. We did miss like 2 or 3 of the webfests because we didn't even know they existed before it was too late to enter. And that part's all amazing and shocking and like humbling. Just being nominated for sound design was probably the most touching thing, because you're maybe going to tie into this, but I don't really know what I'm doing too much with audio editing. I don't know how to use the tools, the software, the sneaky, faster tool tricks and everything. I do it all by ear and listen to every single second multiple times through an episode and just like, a little less, a little more, a little opener, a little more tight. and I could not explain what I was doing to anyone. Like, so there's been a lot of fake it till you make it imposter syndrome stuff there, where I'm constantly being like, will someone just tell me if this sounds bad? Like, you all are very supportive, but will somebody tell me if this sounds bad? And getting that nomination really hit me to the heart, because I do not have a lot of experience with this at all. I talked to one other sound editor, and within 30 seconds I'm having to write down terms to look up.
I was going to ask about that in terms of experience, because they are so intricately edited in Soundscape. But if you're saying that it's not something you really had experience in and just like going by ear, that's really incredible.
The first episode we recorded through Zoom, just my spouse Creature and I had Googled what software do people use for free podcast editing. Audacity was one of the first things that came up. So we recorded an episode, I dragged the vocals into it, and then had to Google, how do you use Audacity? And before that, everything I'd done was like GarageBand. Like, I put some break beats behind sermons from my parents' church when I was like 17 for them. And after that, I was in a hip hop band for a while, but I mostly did vocals because I had won like an open mic competition. So it was sort of spoken word meets hip hop a little bit. So I was never the editor and never the producer. I was always kind of like, hey, maybe try to make it sound like this. And other people would do all of that. So this has been a step into a field with folks who have years under their belts in sound production, and me being like, oh no, I don't really understand what compressing does.
But at the same time, with those people who've had those years of experience, it's also like at least from my experience, a very supportive community who can provide that help if you really were looking for it. So
incredibly so. Yeah, I have multiple people I could reach out to at any point and ask for things. I tend to be I'll watch 3 or 4 YouTube videos on something first and then let myself mess up a couple times before I go to ask, because it's just better with how I learn. So I try not to bother people too much, but like a Ghost of Eli is an amazing resource for all things audio. They have been nothing but incredibly supportive, and they're on the Mayday Roleplay Show, which is just one of the better podcasts in the scene, in my opinion. So there's just been all these very kind people that have been very supportive of either joining us or just hyping up what we're doing. And we try to keep the hype a full circle in Heart as a Dungeon.
I mean, you're wearing a t-shirt right now that's doing exactly that, right?
This shirt of RP Jesters, who just put out a new season like yesterday. Yeah, I'm on the record saying vampires are pretty boring, but this Vampire the Masquerade season, in my opinion, is perfect. They're not trying to be anything they're not. They're leaning exactly into what they're doing, and they nail it absolutely perfectly, in my opinion. I have a whole list of shows I'm supposed to be listening to, and I spent the last week re-listening to the season before just to be ready, because I'm a legitimate fan, not just a friend.
Yeah, that's like when you're working with all these different people that are in this like community, you do realize that you're working with people that you're fans of, and trying to like for me it's always just such a strange thing. Like, I am a legitimate fan of the Heart as a Dungeon, but like we've worked together on streams. I've been on like the podcast as well, and it's just a really nice feeling. Yeah, nothing bad's gonna happen to that moth. Definitely not. Absolutely.
I would never let that happen. We want to have a 3rd season.
In terms though of like being nominated for WebFest or like entered into WebFest, where do you credit the success that you have had in such a short amount of time?
This could be my own side always dampening anything that's a skill issue. So I would probably lead into just the uniqueness of our stories. Sure, most of our awards have been for concept, setting, sound design, which I'm kind of in control of all of that, but I still shrug that off and be like, no, it's because we're telling unique stories. So without putting much credit on myself, I think we just hit the scene with a little bit of a splash. We had our first season. I was kind of watching the space and just seeing what was missing from it, how people I thought did promo right and wrong when it comes to like getting eyes on things, the difference between a community show and an industry show, and just stuff like that. So when we were gearing up for the 2nd season, we were in our session 0, me and the fairies. I'm like, hey, I hope you all are really ready to bring this, because like we're going to win awards with this season. And Kelly I had never played with before. Zoe, this is her second TTRPG thing ever. The first thing she was in was an Orbital Blues one-shot I played with her in like last year. So that's why she applied when she saw that I was doing the casting call, because we had played together once. Mika and I had met a handful of times before we started. So I'm this newbie who's sitting there being like, hey guys, we're going to get an awards. And all of them were just kind of nodding and smiling at me. But I knew what I wanted to do, and I knew how much work I was going to put into it.
Yeah.
They record an hour an episode. I work on them from like 12 to 16 hours. So I knew it was going to come a lot to just the work. And I was ready to do one epic season before we switch into maybe smaller series or smaller table format for a little while.
And you're coming towards, like, at the time of recording, you're coming towards the end of the season recording, right?
First or second week in December, I believe this season should end. We did cut off about 1 or 2 episodes because the fairies went a little off kilter and some of the story changed, and then there was some issues recording one other standalone episode with an international table because of floods and loss in the family and some things like that, all just kind of killed the timeline when all of it scooted. So I think at the end we'll end up having 26 players altogether. And where I thought we were going to hit 30 episodes, I'm thinking it's going to be more like 28, 26, something in there.
That's like, I don't know of any other shows that are having that number of people in a cast for a season as well. Like, that's really ambitious.
Okay. Castleton would be a good example in the space for it. I mean, we're all anyone who's interested in competing for any sort of like crit awards this coming year will be dealing with Castleton on every single level, for like concept, cast, character art. Like, they're going to be a force next year. They also come with a cast of like 100 and something. So there's a lot of community support right there. But AJ and I are actually on a potential panel at PAX to talk about world building together. And I'm very excited to talk about the 2 large casts and how that impacts the world, because it dramatically does, in my opinion.
Yeah, everyone's bringing their own little flavor into that world, and and you as a GM having to manage that as well is quite a lot, I imagine.
Especially all our little standalones. Telling a shorter form show where it's an hour-long episodes, you know, in a standard D&D campaign, you could kill 2 hours of characters just sitting in a like tavern chatting. We don't really have the space for that type of slower crawl in our format. Sorry. So with all the standalones and backstory episodes after season 1 ended, I was thinking of how to tell a more in-depth story without having to give it episodes and episodes and episodes of lore building up. So I decided a backstory at the very beginning episode to make each character think about who they were, and then later on bring it mid-season to remind them who they thought they were going to be, and kind of give them a chance to recorrect or overly correct. And then all the standalone episodes were like, elsewhere, this is happening in the world. Elsewhere, this is happening in the world. So it's a short-handed way to show longer stories, in my opinion. There could be better ways, but this is the way that like I figured out to do this season with. And I've actually really loved how it's all flowed out together.
So actually, picking on one of the things you mentioned there about like those standalone character building episodes at the beginning, I was wondering about your inspiration as a GM of where it comes from, and I'm specifically thinking about the episode of the flame that opens its eyes for the first time. Like, where does the inspiration for your stories come from?
I have to give a lot of credit of that one to Kelly. Kelly the Kellhop is a stupendous player who is challenging constantly in the best way when it comes to role play. There's certain players like Michelle Copter is a UK player you might be familiar with. I am on my edge around certain players because I know they can RP circles around me. And I used to be nervous about that. Now it just makes me go to another bag of tricks when I interact with them. Kelly is just such a profound and lush player that when they had designed Egan, the character, and they're like, I think they grew from a flame. I was like, okay, well, A, very cool. And then B, when I was getting all the backstories together, I was like, do you want to try to role play out what happens when a flame comes to existence? Because I will ask you questions you're not fully prepped for. It could be kind of a hard toss. Are you sure this is what you want to do? And Kelly did not waver in the slightest. And that very first question, what is it like when a flame like basically realizes they're alive? I was so nervous watching them answer because I knew how hard of a role play that could be to do right, and they just blew it out of the absolute park. So a lot of my imagination fence posts keep getting scooted back based on the people I'm playing with and the people I've gathered around me, because I know they can handle a more open expanse of space to fill. And it doesn't have to be me kind of holding their hand. It's just me kind of hoping with them that they're going to do a good job. And they have been. A lot of the Heart as a Dungeon is we just rely on the players to knock it out of the park every time. And usually they do.
And something that I know that you have talked a little bit about recently is on community. You've already mentioned it on here about community versus industry driven, and like it's a very much a community driven podcast that you've got going. So how important is that to you?
Extremely, especially this week. This week, I basically sat down by myself and made a list of the biggest names with the biggest following I thought I could get for a show. I was just curious to see what it would look like. And I looked at it at the end and it was quite impressive. But then I was like, I don't really know these people. I don't know if they're just great role players or there is a depth there where if I throw them off their feet, they can find that inner reservoir and bring the scene right back. And I would be less comfortable. So it was kind of this decision of, am I just trying to get the most eyes on the show? Is that what I'm trying to do? And had to kind of admit to myself, no, that's not what I really want to do. I would rather all these, I'm a little older in the space than some, being more like 40 than 30. So in my head, there's a mindset of, okay, I can make some of these kids famous, or I can help them if that's what they want to be. I don't need to reach out to the bigger names. What if we actually took the time, the patience, and the work to make these bigger names? Because in my ancient age, one day when I'm hiding in the dark from some new generation that's eating people across the world, then these folks can keep me safe because I helped. I don't know if you could hear our dogs.
There's nothing wrong with a dog in the background.
So that kind of changed our shifting this week, because I realized I was having access to bigger players and I needed to figure out if that's what I wanted to do with the show. Because first going into it, it's like, oh, heck, I can get this person. Why wouldn't I want to get this person? Oh, I can get this person. Why wouldn't I get this person? And then being friends with Gina on Blackwater and being behind the scenes with her, hearing about like Matt Mercer joining them and Brennan Lee Mulligan joining them long before it was announced. Part of me had this twinge of jealousy. And then the other part of me is like, would I want a GM for Matt Mercer? Or would that just be terrified? And it was kind of a moment of having to decide what way would we want to go. Are we trying to rise above our level in the community? Or are we trying to make this a community project? Because I have so much faith in the people in the Heart as a Dungeon Discord. There's about 70 of them in there at this point, which is insane to me. I really need to start organizing that Discord. But all of them I would throw into some of the most intense roleplay I could find and have complete confidence in them being able to find their way out of it. And I think it's just a really special group of people. So our focus is on them. Trying to get them in as many shows as we can. Farrell and I have stopped watching TV or playing video games or anything. Like, we work on this 6 nights a week with her in the other room just drawing frantically and me in my sound troll cave for hours on end. But it's a passion project for sure.
But I guess what you said though, in terms of like if you'd want to get eyes on the podcast,
Mm-hmm.
I mean you're doing that like people, like the number of listens and views, like it clearly is getting to people, and you don't need those big names in order to do that. I mean, I'm sure they'd help in a kind of small little push up, but it's the content you're putting out that's important, right?
Definitely. And I think it's a ratio. Like if we were casting 12 people, I could see reaching out to 2 as more of a like, oh, get some new people in, but then would try to maintain like 10 being from our community. I saw a fairly quite successful D&D podcast who recently announced like 100,000 listens, which is an insane amount to a show like ours that's new and everything. And then the very next week made a post about how sad they were that they didn't get any community involvement on their posts. And I was thinking about that for a few days, like, well, knowing that many people are listening doesn't make you feel like you're part of the community, but having like 3 or 4 likes on something did make you feel like you're part of the community. And it's just that decision. Do you want listeners or do you want that community connection? And I think there's a space you can do both, but I think the tactics are different for planning for each one. So I just kind of watch what other shows do and think about it in my TISM cave a little bit and just let it roll around. And then it usually comes out with some sort of, Farrell, I think we should do this. And that's how our grant started and our little awards and stuff started. And our oath to always have at least half BIPOC at a table, even though half femme presenting seems to be just a natural cause of the types of stories we tell so far. Sometimes if I send messages out, I don't hear back from the mask presenting folks. I'm like, hey, we're telling a really sad story about ghosts that hate our dads. You want in? And I just won't hear anything back.
I mean, I'm not at all surprised by that. But like the stories that you're telling are clearly very good. So it's only the loss of the people that haven't got back to you about them, I think, for not participating. Right, we're running out of time, and as we said before, we could just talk all day. We've mentioned community. What is something in the TTRPG community that is exciting you just now?
Heck. My excitement tends to be around collaboration. I love what I'm doing, and I know I could just keep doing it without having to even watch other people's shows. I know a lot of people that run great shows that have no time to take in anyone else's content. And as being a permanent hype person, I try not to get to that place. But I'm trying to get some collaborations going with a lot of other podcast runners. We recorded our Halloween episode recently, which had the hosts of Game Master Monday, 5 GMs in a Trench Coat, Blades of Mayari, and Rachel from RP Jesters in it, all people who help run these shows. And I'm definitely prodding them into like a podicule. Like, what if we just put out a show that's nothing but podcast runners, and we can just keep having folks come in and out as a way to like bring the shows together a little bit. And also talking to folks about coalitions of TTRPG podcasts that make a promise to always have BIPOC folks represented and things of that sort. So, hey, you want to be part of our coalition? You should do the same thing. So just trying to do little positive influences where I feel we have the space, but also realizing I'm still a new fish, and I see a lot of people reach a small amount of notoriety in the scene, and instantly they feel like their opinions are a little more important. And telling people how to do things is a little more pressing. And I'm trying to never really become that person. That's why you're in our Discord. I'll make posts like, hey, if you ever see me being an ass, everyone, call me out, because I'm trying to be better than an ass. And it's just a new territory to navigate, and trying to put up as much accountability around me as I can. We've even set up a council to watch all of the money stuff we do as a podcast with the awards and everything, because I wanted transparency on anything that involved money or titles or awards or anything like that.
I mean, it's a low bar in terms of what others do. So it's clearly, you said I'm in the Discord, I see it, and like it's very clear that you are trying to be very community focused, very transparent, and very accountable at all times, which is just really refreshing to see, because you don't see it in a lot of other places, whether it's in this community or other similar style ones. So no, it is awesome to see, and you're walking the walk rather than just talking it, which is great.
Trying to. I think it's a mixture of growing up with parents in like church boards and stuff who are very focused on transparency. They always wanted people seeing everything they did. And then Farrell and I were the community aid folks where we lived during COVID. So we did diaper drives every week where we were giving out like 300 to 1,000 diapers every Saturday, and people were donating the money and we were buying it in bulk and all that. So we had full transparency when it came to all of that also. So coming from church, poetry publishing, mutual aid into TTRPG, it's not our first time organizing larger groups of people. To be honest, it's easier to get 20 people in person to hand out diapers than it is to get 4 fairies to a table at their computers to record 2 hours.
Oh yeah, that strikes really like true. That. Yeah, we're rapidly running out of time. What's next for The Heart as a Dungeon?
Oh, heck. What happened on Pleasure and West River will be our next, not as much of an epic as this one, more of a 3.5 month epic at the beginning of next year. And that's 14 players doing solo sessions explaining their own views of a happening that happened at a street corner in a city named Pangea. The cast of that is amazing, and none of them really knows the full picture, except for Oh Hey, It's Gina, who is the last player and has the entire picture. The Kellhop and some other folks have been trying to whittle her down and get information, but Gina's standing strong. As another member of the Sad Sack Cabin, we have our secret oaths to never break the sad pacts we have for other players who want to find them out. But that's going to be a great season. I'm very excited about that season.
And that'll be like start of 2025?
Yep. Yeah, January to about April. We'll probably take the last 3 weeks of December off after we finish this campaign. And then after that, we already have things sort of booked through the whole year, and there will be more than one series at a time. There's going to be some longer form series that are usually 1 or 2 person tables because I'm seeking more intimacy in scenes. And then on the side, we'll have a lot of mini series recorded that are full parties of 4 playing like 4 to 8 episodes. So we're going to have them rotating like Thursdays for the main show, and every once in a while Tuesdays we'll have a new show on it. So that's the plan, at least. Things can change.
No, it's really exciting. Thank you so much for coming and have a chat with me, RahRah.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure. Where can people find out more about you?
Oh, heck. Heart as a Dungeon on Twitter, Threads, Instagram, Blue Sky, though we don't really remember Blue Sky. And you can find me pretty easy around there. RahRah story time. I'm not that important. The podcast, though, life-changing.
Folks, if you've been watching along, please do go and check out The Heart as a Dungeon. It is absolutely amazing. I'll be linking in cards below if this is on YouTube, and also along social media posts. RahRah, thank you so much again for coming along.
Thank you, Sam.
Yeah, folks at home, thank you so much. Take care, and we'll see you again very soon. Goodbye.